Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into something that is literally the bedrock of a functioning economy, even though it mostly operates completely behind the scenes. We're going to unpack how India ensures absolute financial transparency by creating what we can essentially think of as a master recipe for its entire economy. It's a fascinating process of building consensus, and I am so excited to walk you through it. To really grasp the scale of this challenge, I want you to imagine thousands of branches of a massive national restaurant franchise. Now imagine if every single one of those branches was baking their signature cake just a little bit differently. Some use butter, some use oil, some bake it for 20 minutes, others for 40. Without a master recipe, you get total chaos. You wouldn't even know what you were buying. And that is exactly why a massive economy absolutely needs strict accounting standards. Without them, figuring out a company's true financial health is basically just a guessing game.
So our main goal here is pretty straightforward. We want to move away from a mismatched, chaotic mess where companies report profits based on their own completely unique definitions and move towards a streamlined, standardized system. When we have robust accounting standards in place, we achieve our ultimate objective, which is allowing investors, regulators, and the general public to make true apples-to-apples comparisons between completely different businesses. It is all about total transparency.
So who actually writes this master recipe? Well, meet the head chefs of India's accounting world, the Accounting Standards Board, or the ASB. They're a highly specialized board working directly under the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, which you'll often hear called the ICAI. The ASB are the chief architects. They're tasked with designing the exact rules that every corporation has to follow. Okay, let's quickly look at our game plan. We've established our main goal of speaking one language, so now we'll walk through the 4 distinct phases of the process: the rough draft, the VIP taste test, public feedback, and finally, the official rulebook. Let's kick things off with Phase 1, the rough draft.
Now, this process doesn't just happen out of nowhere. First, the ASB has to identify a broad area where an accounting standard is actually needed. Maybe there's a brand new type of financial asset or perhaps a loophole that desperately needs closing. Once they nail down that need, they put together a study group made up of ICAI members. This specialized team works together to write up a preliminary draft. And once that rough draft is done, the ASB steps back in to analyze it, review it, make revisions, and sometimes they'll even send it right back to the study group if it isn't quite right. And it's really interesting to look at the exact ingredients required in this very first draft. A standard isn't just a vague set of suggestions. It has to specifically outline the objective and the scope. It needs incredibly strict definitions of terms, so there's absolutely no ambiguity. It has to lay out exact recognition and measurement principles, which you can think of as the exact instructions on when to add an ingredient and how much to measure out. And finally, it dictates presentation and disclosure requirements. Basically, how the final financial dish must be plated and presented to the public.
Moving right along to Phase 2, the VIP taste test.
Before bringing this out to the general public, the ASB needs to see how this recipe sits with the most important players in the economy. They circulate the draft to a highly targeted list of specified bodies and council members. Then, they sit down and hold deep, detailed discussions to really understand their views, their concerns, and any technical objections. Based on those intensive talks, they finalize what is known as the exposure draft.
And we are talking about the real heavy hitters here for this taste test. We're looking at the Reserve Bank of India, the Central Board of Direct Taxes, SEBI, and major industry chambers like ASSOCHAM, CII, and FICCI. Getting consensus from these regulators is absolutely vital. I mean, if the master recipe doesn't work for the regulators overseeing the banks or the stock market, the whole system just breaks down entirely. Next up is Phase 3, public feedback.
This is where the ASB takes that exposure draft and issues it out to the wider membership of the ICAI and, crucially, to the general public. They invite comments, criticisms, and suggestions. It is an incredible stress test for the rules. Based on the real-world feedback they gathered during this public exposure period, the ASB will make further refinements and then finalize the draft to submit to the main council of the ICAI.
Because think about it, a standard is literally only as good as the feedback it receives during this phase. This democratization step is what ensures the standard actually works out there in the real world. A theoretical rule cooked up in a boardroom might be logically flawless, but if it creates impossible administrative burdens for actual everyday businesses, it totally fails our main goal. Public feedback anchors the standard to reality, keeping us locked onto that ultimate objective of clear, actionable financial transparency. And that brings us to the final hurdle, the official rulebook. The draft has survived the study group.
It passed the VIP regulators, and it made it through the general public. Now the main ICAI Council takes over. They have the ultimate authority here. They review all the public comments, consult one last time with the ASB, make any final, necessary modifications, and then they officially issue the accounting standard. It is now the law of the land for financial reporting. If we zoom out and look at this entire process end to end, it's an incredibly rigorous funnel. It starts super wide with just a simple identified need, funnels down to a small study group draft, expands out to VIP circulation, opens up fully for public exposure, and then finally narrows right down into a single official binding standard that entire industries have to follow to guarantee that apples-to-apples transparency.
Understanding this rigorous behind-the-scenes process really gives you a whole new appreciation for those numbers you see in an annual report, doesn't it? But it also leaves you wondering. As the business world rapidly evolves with complex things like artificial intelligence, carbon credits, and digital assets, what completely new areas of finance will soon require their very own standard? The ASB's job is never truly finished. They're always going to be back in the kitchen, testing new recipes to keep the economy speaking one clear language. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and we'll see you next time.